Welcome, everyone, to our weekly Torah learning of spreading more light into the world. We always like to start off with giving because how we give, that's how Hashem will give to us. Let's give generously so Hashem will give us generously. I'm going to put some tzedakah in the pushka. Please join me from home. We're going to say some names for Refuah Shalema for Chani and Rivka Bas Shendel, Yosef ben Devorah Leah, Rezel Bas Adas, Rafal Chaim Meir ben Simachasha, Yosef Shlomo ben Risha, Devorah Leah Bas Yafaliba, Mercedes ben Esther, Esther Bela Bas Yehudis Chana, Gershon Leib ben Menucha, and everyone that needs should have a complete Refuah Shalema. I do these classes weekly in memory of my dear grandmother, Rivka Dina Bas Yosef Yehuda. I hope you're proud. Chaim Ber ben Betzalo, known as Chaim Ber Wolshansky. To save a life is saving a world, and he saved many in the Soviet Union. Bela Bas Betzalo, my other grandmother. Sonia Zahara Bas David. She perished in a terrible fire this year, and we're honoring her neshama. And lastly, my uncle who passed away this year, Shalom Dover ben Eliyahu Akiva. Not every gem is a giant, and not every giant is a gem, but he was both a giant and a gem. We're also dedicating this class to all the IDF and for all the safety of all the Jewish people around the whole world. So today's actually starting Yud Bais Tamuz tonight, and I'm very excited about this. It's a yontif. It's like the start of Geula, which is redemption. And my great grandfather had a lot to do with the previous Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe. And it's not known because he passed away young in Paris before there was Zooms and before there was social media and before people used to share their stuff. But today I have with you, today I have with you all Yosef. Today I have with all of us, Rabbi Yosef Minkowitz of Montreal. He is the Dean of Beis Rivka, and I'm so excited to have him here to share some words about Yud Bais Tamuz and about my great-grandfather and his grandfather, Yitzchak Yaakov Minkowitz, was known as Itchke Laimes, the son of Lema Minkowitz. Thank you so much for being here and making this happen today. Welcome.
Hello. It's a special day today, Yud Bais Tamuz. It's a celebration for the entire world, as the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote. It's to every single Yid, even B'Shem Yisrael Yechuna, just the fact that he's called a Jew, it applies to every single Yid in the world, because it's a big celebration of being able to have Yiddishkeit flourish, even under difficult circumstances, to flourish in the Soviet Union at that time. It's almost now 100 years since this took place. Now, you mentioned my Zayde, as was known in Lubavitch. He learned in the yeshiva of Lubavitch by the Rebbe Rashab. It was known as Itchke Laimes. His name was Yitzchak Yaakov Minkowitz. So he was very close with the Frierdiker Rebbe and with the Rebbe. As a matter of fact, in Tofresh Pei Zayin, in 1927, he lived in Leningrad, Petersburg. And for a time, he was even the gabbai to allow people to go into Yechidus at that time. Not only that, he happened to sat in Spalerki, in the infamous prison in Leningrad in Petersburg, and he was released a short while before the Frierdiker Rebbe was arrested. And when he was released, the Frierdiker Rebbe asked him many questions. What's the Seder? What's the schedule over there? How does it go? Etc., etc. It was very, very surprising that the Frierdiker Rebbe asked so many details. And a while later, when he was arrested, it began to make sense. And when the Frierdiker Rebbe, we know the story, he was arrested on Tesvav Sivan, middle of the night after Yechidus. And his sentence was a sentence, as the Rebbe told the story, in Tafshich Beis, he was sentenced to death. The Frierdiker Rebbe himself saw the actual file laying on the desk, so he saw that it was crossed out. And after that, it said 10 years, Salavki, to send exile also, far away. And then that was crossed out. And then it was 3 years in Kostroma, to be 3 years in exile. They came to the Frierdiker Rebbe to tell him the news that he's being released from the Spalerki prison. which people were shot there every single night. As the Frierdiker Rebbe said himself, he heard the shots going in the cellar, people being shot on a regular basis. And he was told on Thursday that he'll be sent to Kostroma for 3 years. But meanwhile, he can go in for a few hours to visit his family who lived in the same city, not far away. And at the evening, he has to travel on his own, not as someone who's arrested, on his own. He has to travel to the city of Kostroma. So the Frierdiker Rebbe asked them, so when will I arrive in Kostroma if I leave on Thursday night? So he said, you'll be arriving Friday night, which is Shabbos. So he said, under no circumstances will I be going and traveling on Shabbos. The Rebbe spoke about it a few times. The Rebbe said that it's an amazing thing because according to the halacha, to stay in the jail, it's pikuach nefesh. They can do what you want, as mentioned before. People being shot and everything can change in a minute. And the fact that he refused is because a Rebbe, Mesiras Nefesh, and the Kiddush Hashem, etc., there's lengthy sichos of the Rebbe and Chelik Chavchas Kutu Sichos, other places. And the Rebbe explains how important it was for the Frierdiker Rebbe, even though it's not a real malacha. He's not driving a car, he's just traveling traveling in a train or in a trolley, whatever it may be. Nevertheless, under no circumstances would he travel. So they said, if that's the case, you're going to be staying in the jail. And they even told him, maybe you're not going to get out. So he said, no matter what happens, I'm not traveling on Shabbos. So Sunday, the end was that they called him in again. And they said, okay, you can go Sunday, the same arrangement. You'll go home for a few hours, be able to meet your family. And then in the evening, you'll have to go to Kostroma. So when he came home on Sunday, the family was there. His mother, his wife, and his daughters were in the house. And also, my grandfather, as mentioned before, Rabbi Laimes, was in the house also, together with his brother-in-law, Reb Zalman Duchman. Zalman Duchman married the sister of Rabbi Laimes. So they were brother-in-laws. And he also lived in Leningrad. So they happened to be very often in the Rebbe's house. When the Frierdiker Rebbe came home, they were both in the house. And I heard this from my father and also from Zalman Duchman. They actually printed in a sefer. He gave out a sefer, L'Shem Eisen, that the Frierdiker Rebbe, when he came out of jail and he came to the house, he asked them, what were you doing while I was sitting in jail? Did you learn Chassidus? So they answered, we said Tehillim. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said, I was writing Chassidus. And he told him that the Frierdiker Rebbe said to my Morim on Shavuos. The Frierdiker Rebbe was arrested like a week and a half after Shavuos. He was arrested on Tezvav, the 15th day of Sivan. So just over a week after Shavuos, when the Frierdiker Rebbe happened to say to my Morim on Shavuos, but he didn't write them down. In those days, the Rabbeim themselves used to write down many of the Maimorim. The Rebbe never did that, to write a Maimer that he said, but the previous Rabbeim did write down Maimorim. So when he came to jail, he wrote Maimer, and he gave the Maimer to the Rebbe, who was also in the house at that time. And the Rebbe gave it to my grandfather and to Reb Zalman Duchman. They should write it over. They should write over the Maimer to make a copy of it. And on the Maimer was written, on the first Maimer was written, Yud-Bes Sivan, the 19th day of Sivan. He was arrested the 15th. This was the 19th day of Sivan. And on it was also written on the top, Nichta b'Maiser, was written in jail. The Rebbe wrote it himself. On the second Maimer, it said, Chav Sivan, and also it said Nichta b'Maser. It was also written in jail. So to my Morim, and my father told me that where did he get paper from in jail all of a sudden? So in jail, it seems that one thing they did help you out was if you wanted a cigarette, they gave you a cigarette. But in those days, there wasn't a cigarette like Marlboro that comes all rolled up, whatever, a proper cigarette. In those days, it was tobacco. And they gave you pieces of paper, like square pieces of paper. You put the tobacco into the paper, and you rolled it up. and that's what became the cigarette. You lit it up, you have a cigarette. So the Friedrich Rebbe said that he saved these papers, or he got a number of these papers, he got hold of them. And on those little papers, those little square papers, he wrote the Maimorim, 2 Maimorim. And he said on the second Maimer, it was the middle of writing, they took away a karandash as a pencil. They took away my pencil, and so I couldn't write. The last word he wrote there was Ir. Ir was the last word in that Maimer. Unfortunately, for some reason, that Maimer is not known, not available. The Rebbe does bring it down in the Mafteches, in the list of Maimorim that the Friedrich Rebbe said, and he mentions this Maimer, but in the Maimorim that were printed from Tafresh Pezayin, it said that it didn't reach them. So at this point, no one knows where the copy is, or the Xaviat for sure not. But the Maimer, my grandfather, Zalman Duchman, they actually held the Maimer. As a matter of fact, my father told me that his father went over to the Friedrich Rebbe and he asked him a question. In the Maimer, something seems wrong. So the Friedrich Rebbe said, "Oh no, that's obvious. That's you have to correct that. An obvious correction that you have to make." And he gave him, and that's what it was. So that happened on Gimel Tammuz itself, and it came to go to Kastrama, as he had to go, as mentioned before. It was ordered that he must go to Kastrama in the evening. The rest, a lot of it is written up in the diaries, etc. What transpired there with his mother, with the children, etc. Oh, there's a picture. Oh,
I'm just going to hold this up. This is the heroic struggle. It was written by Rabbi Metzger, and it was actually it was corrected and proofread by the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and I really highly recommend everyone to get this book. It goes through. It's a very painful read because it talks about the Friedrich Rebbe being tortured in Israel, but in Israel, in prison, in the worst prison that you can imagine, and the Friedrich Rebbe wrote this book, like from a diary. This book was written from the Rebbes, and then the Rebbe corrected anything that needed correction. So it's a very valuable book to have in your library.
There's a lot of information
And
there.
I just want to say something before we continue.
Yeah,
I once told someone that my great grandfather, I heard that he was a chaver to the Friedrich Rebbe, and she told me, we don't talk like that, and you don't say friend. And I actually got it corrected by someone that knew, and they said it was actually written in a sicha that the previous Rebbe related to my great grandfather and your grandfather as a chaver. I don't know how he wrote it in the letter, but it was written. And now it all makes sense because everything that you're saying, I didn't know that he was in the house when he got arrested. It's not very known, so
yeah.
it's pretty amazing.
That's why I'm trying to fill in some information that's not so widely known. And so he went to Kastrama, and the Friedrich Rebbe asked, he wanted he has 3 daughters, one of his daughters should accompany him to Kastrama. And he said, and this Reb Zalman Duchman actually wrote to the Rebbe, that's how we know the story, and we have the actual manuscript, the handwriting of Reb Zalman Duchman, but he wrote to the Rebbe, so that's how it became known. So the Friedrich, because he was in the house, he heard it himself. So the Friedrich Rebbe said that the oldest daughter, it's Chana, she's too sharp. So the youngest daughter, it's Rebbe Shena, she's too quiet. And the middle one is very good, that's Rebbe Chaim Mushke. So he took her along. She went to Kastrama. There was a few Chassidim, but she was the one that went. The Rebbe did not go. The Rebbe stayed behind. And Leningrad, I'm sure there was things to do, etc. Later, as we know, even though it was supposed to be in Kastrama for 3 years, with great Nisim on Yud Bais Tamuz, which is the birthday of the Friedrich Rebbe. He was 47 years old then. So he was informed that he's being released. In other words, that the information came from headquarters, from Moscow, that they have to release him, even though it's only just basically a week and a half, whatever it was. But they said the office was closed then. There was a civil holiday that they had in Kostroma at that time. I don't think it was even the whole Russia, the way I heard from my father. But in any case, the office was closed. So they told him that you have to come tomorrow and we'll give you the official paper documents because you're arrested. So you have to know that you're free. No. So that's why it's called Yud-Bes Tamuz, by the way. Yud Bais Tamuz was informed, and also the birthday, his birthday. Yud Tamuz was the actual release. Now, Rebbe Mushke, when she was there, she wanted to immediately inform the family what's happening. So she actually told this, but I'm saying now, she gave a deposition when there was a whole case with the Sforim, the Dan Notzach in Tovshim Memhei, 1985. So she had to testify in the house, and so recorded. So she said, she was talking about when her father was arrested and she was there. So she mentioned that she immediately called the family, called by phone, which was something unusual. There was very few phones in the whole Russia at that time, but she called the family, and she told them basically that the father is coming home for Shabbos. And then she added 2 words, because the phones went like you were paying by the minute, by the half a minute. And she added the words Bli Pirsum, which should not be publicized. And the reason being, she didn't want people to start coming en masse to the house in Leningrad and Petersburg, that for Shabbos, because it still has to be quiet, etc., etc. So that's what she gave over the message. That he's coming home for Shabbos basically means that he's being released. The 3 years are over, and Bli Pirsum. So as soon as my grandfather and Zalman Duchman and the Rebbe, another Chassidim, a few Chassidim were there, when this news came in, they were so excited from tremendous simcha. They broke out in dancing and singing, but they lived in an apartment house. There's a picture of the house. It's still standing, actually, the house where they lived in Machavaya 22. So we lived on a second and a third floor. So they didn't want that. The neighbors underneath said, hey, all of a sudden, what's a celebration going on in the middle out of nowhere? What happened over there? They knew there's a rabbi living there. They knew he was arrested. So what's happening? So they took off their shoes. And they were dancing in their socks that you shouldn't hear. And that's what happened on Yud Bais Tamuz, Tafresh Bezayin, in the Rebbe's house. And many years later, the Rebbe, before he became Rebbe, that's in Tovshin Ches in 1948, he wrote a letter, Yud Gimel Iyar, to my grandfather. And he writes, amongst other things, I hope that you still remember when we were together in the year Tafresh Bezayin, it's 1927, by the Fabrengen Bli Pirsum, without publicity. And he tells them, Bahapruzder, in the hallway, Machavaya is the name of the streets, as Tanose, the argument that you was discussing with Dibur, and you spoke about Binyan Poraduma, about Poraduma. Poraduma was that week, that was the Parsha, like last week's Parsha that we have this year's, it comes out now, it's Parsha's Bolog, then it was Parsha's Chukas. The Parsha's Chukas that speaks about Poraduma. So the Rebbe called it, that Fabrengen became known as Isvadus Bli Pirsum. The Isvadus Bli Pirsum, which means without publicity, because that was the expression that the Rebbe Mushke used. She used those 2 words, Bli Pirsum, that became the name of that Fabrengen. As a matter of fact, once they had the information that the Rebbe is coming out of jail, out of Kostroma, so they wanted to publicize it to other Chassidim also out of Leningrad. There was no fear that they're going to be coming, just to let them know the big simcha, they should be, it's a big yontif. So they sent telegrams. So the telegrams they wrote that is freed, and they signed, instead of signing a name, they didn't want to have more information on the telegram more than is necessary. The telegram was signed Bli Pirsum. That was, so the Chassidim knew right away that's not a name. But they got the message. It became part of the telegram. So Bli became like a first name, and Pearson became a second name. So they found out the information all over Russia, wherever they were able to send the telegrams. that the Friedrich Rebbe is out, but bli pirsum. So they got the message, and meanwhile they didn't have to put their names. No names had to be put down, and they wrote bli pirsum. And it was a very big Fabrengen, a simcha. The Rebbe actually spoke about it by Fabrengen once that was called bli pirsum. So this letter is an interesting letter. It's just there's 2 lines that the Rebbe speaks about it, and he says, "I hope that you still remember when we were together by the Fabrengen, bli pirsum, in the hallway, Machavai." The Rebbe gave him the exact place in the house where they were standing, and Fabrengen together. It seems they were standing there and talking about this. And so this letter has been printed in the Igros Kedesh for many years. It came out. Over 40 years, about 40 years ago, it came out of Shemem Hey around that time, and that's it. We never knew that the Zayde, the Laimes, actually responded to the Rebbe, because we don't have it any place recorded that he actually responded. But about 9 years ago, came out a book. It's called The Early Years. Very well documented book. Tremendous amount of work was put into it. So over there, they bring down this line that the Rebbe wrote to my Zayda, to Laimes, and also they have actually printed a photocopy of the letter that he wrote back to the Rebbe. It must have been in the archives of the Rebbe. It's kept in the archives, which we never saw, but they had access to the archives. And they actually put in the actual Ksav Yad of what Mezed actually wrote. So first of all, the Zayd, I'll just mention to you what but the way he wrote it over here, he writes back, because the Rebbe used the expression, you surely remember, you recall the Fabrengen. So he says, I don't merely recall that Fabrengen, it's engraved on my heart. It was a special day, a luminous day that was shined and revealed. A tremendous special day, he said. It's not a question of remembering. You can't remember. It's not a question of memory. It's part of your life. It's part of who you are. And I want to read to you part of also the Ksav Yad that he wrote. And he said that the Fabrengen I remember very well. It's engraved in my life. But he said, and I remember the tinus and what we spoke about was something very special. But he said that what you mentioned about Pora Aduma, he tells the Rebbe that what you mentioned about Pora Aduma, that part I don't have clear in my mind, because he was saying it. He didn't have to remember everything that he was saying. So he asked the Rebbe, if it's not difficult for you, if you can please write to me what we spoke about then. But it's, if Fabrengen, how can I forget the Fabrengen? It's engraved, mamish engraved in our hearts. So this is what we see. This is some of the connection that we had with the Rebbe, with being arrested. And then it might be worthy to mention that when the Friedrich Rebbe came to America in Yud Bais, he came in Tafshin, but in Yud Bais in 1942, on Yud Bais Tamuz, there was a Fabrengen, and during the Fabrengen, he mentioned amazing things. He said that the last Yud Bais Tamuz, before the histalkus of his father, so he said that every Yud Bais Tamuz, his father, the Rebbe Rashab, used to say a maimer for him personally. Not besides the Maimorim that was said for everybody, for the public, he had a maimer that was said for him, because the relationship between the Rebbe Rashab and the Friedrich Rebbe, some older Rebbeim were like that, was a father and a son, a regular family. But then there was an actual time that they went into Yechidus. Even the Rebbeim went into Yechidus to their father, who was a Rebbe. Even though they spoke to him every single day, but Yechidus is something special. And he said a maimer for him. He told him many specific stories, very special things. So he said that on Yud Bais Tamuz, Tov Reish Ayin Tes, that's 1919. That's the last Yud Bais Tamuz. Was the before he was, the Rebbe Rashab was nostalgic on Beis Nisan Tov Reish Pei, which is 1920. So he said a maimer, and the maimers spoke a lot. The whole thing was about Mesiras Nefesh. Mesiras Nefesh. And he said, not only that, the Maimer that he said then, that after the Maimer, many, many times he spoke to him about Mesiras Nefesh, and he told him clearly, for Torah, you have to be Mesiras Nefesh B'Peil. Mesiras Nefesh B'Peil means in actuality, give up your life. Not a question of Nefesh. If it's difficult, you have to do Mesiras Nefesh, even if it's difficult. But Pasha Mesiras Nefesh B'Peil Mamish, not only potentially, but B'Peil. Okay? And then he adds, the last seconds, let's the Regoyim. Regoyim means seconds, not minutes, not hours. The last Regoyim of his life on this world, he spoke to me about that. Nobody knew that till the Frierdiker Rebbe mentioned it in Yud Bais in America. He said the last seconds he spoke to me about that, and then the Rebbe added by that Farbrengen that after the Istalkus, after Beis Nis and Topfresh Pei, then started many exedas and decrees that the Efsektia started and the Russian government against having chadorim for young children. And he said it became an issue of not being able to educate the kids because they were after them and they're arresting people. So he said in Tov Reish Pei Beis, that's 1922. 1922, that's in other words, that's 2 years after the Histalkus. So he said, we got together 9 Tmimim. Tmimim is a bocher who learned in the Babich Yeshiva, is called a Tomim. Babich Yeshiva was founded in Tov Reish Nun Zayin. Tov Reish Nun Zayin, that's the Frierdiker Rebbe then was 17 years old, was actually by his wedding. So this was in 1897 in Tov Reish Nun Zayin. So a Bachra learned in the yeshiva was called a Tomim. Tomim means a complete person because they learn Nikla, they learn Chossid, they learn everything. So that makes the unit of a Tomim. So he said, the Frierdiker Rebbe said then in Yud Bais, they got together 9 Tmimim, which means 9 Bachrim. And he said, and I was the 10th. Frierdiker Rebbe said about himself, there was 9, and I was the 10th. And we swore to each other to be Mesa Nefesh on Torah, and he used the Lashon Atipas Dam Achrin, to the last drop of blood. Literally, not figuratively. Literally, the last drop of blood. And he said they divided up the work amongst the people that were there. You take this area, you take that area, etc., etc. And they should be Mesa Nefesh. The only way to survive and Yiddishkeit should flourish and the light should not go out was only but Mesiras Nefesh Mamish and the Tekeh. That's how it was. So the exact 9, the Frierdiker Rebbe said about himself, he was one of the 10. The other 9 is not really known exactly, but I saw printed actually, and it's mentioned, a few names are mentioned. I don't know the exact sources, but they mentioned one of the Chassidim was the Meshach Haritonov. The Frierdiker Rebbe is well-known maskir, a secretary, but more than a secretary, is his right-hand man, with Reb Chatzah Fagin, then Michal Katzenellenbegen, Reb Ben Shem Tov, famous Chossid, and they mentioned also Rabbi Yitzchak Minkowitz. He was also one of the 9. So again, I don't have the exact source, but that's what's mentioned in a few places, and the others are not known, and that the Pasha swore, and they made a covenant. They swore that they're going to, whatever happens, they swore allegiance that they're going to keep working on being mechanech, and mainly was the young children. The Rebbe once said that to teach adults wasn't such a big aveda, so to speak, wasn't so terrible. The main thing they realized, the adults already anyway, they're adults, whatever they learn. But the kids, to set up a whole new generation of kids that are actually inculcated that they have the union of Yiddishkeit and Mesiras Nefesh in their veins, in their blood, that they'll have keeping Torah mitzvahs no matter what, under very difficult circumstances. Like, and in that same Sikh in Yud Bais, the Frierdiker Rebbe mentions that what they learned, they had to learn in hiding, and he's used the words akel in kellers, And he said in America, it's called a cellar. He said, but there was literally a keller. Literally, they dug a hole in the ground. It was cold, no heating, no windows. And they used to learn there a few hours. They used to learn with the Talmidim. And even in the cellars that was hidden, you could think it's out of the way, they were afraid. And many Malamdim were sent away to Siberia. Many were shot, unfortunately. And right away, the Friedrich Rebbe once said, as soon as one was taken away, there was always someone to take the place. And the Rebbe once spoke about this. The Rebbe said that was the hardest thing for the Friedrich Rebbe, to send someone else. He put himself in Mesiras Nefesh, but to send someone else, knowing the danger, but that was the biggest Mesiras Nefesh for the Rebbe himself, the Friedrich Rebbe, that he had to send people into danger. So the Friedrich Rebbe mentioned Tovshin Beis, by that Fabrengen, he said that they had to make sure that they shouldn't be caught, at least to help them out. They had women used to walk around in the street near that keller where they were learning, and she was selling bub. Bub is like we serve by Yishalom Zocha. They serve bub. That's beans, whatever. They were barely walking around selling things, but that was, they weren't selling anything. They were the eyes to see if danger is coming, and had a way to immediately inform them that there's a danger coming, so be able to run away and save their lives. That's what Rebbe said then in Tovshin Beis. That's how the operation was. Everybody was involved. The men, the women. If they catch a woman doing that, all say, "What are you doing?" Oh, you're an informer. They gave, everybody was in it. And by Fabrengen, many years later, the Rebbe spoke about the Mesiras Nefesh of the Friedrich Rebbe and the tremendous, and the Chassidim. They literally gave up their lives. They gave up their lives, Mesiras Nefesh, to the last drop of blood. And the Rebbe said, thanks to that, we have today Yidden in Russia that are Shemre Teira Mitzvahs, that are keeping Teira Mitzvahs 70 years after all these Zedas, all these decrees. And the Rebbe said, there's people sitting right here by the Fabrengen, right here, right now, who are in that category. And that's all because of the Mesiras Nefesh Mamish of the Friedrich Rebbe. At a time that many of the Gdei Yisrael, the Rabbonim, who lived in Russia at that time, said it's a losing battle. We can't do it. It's a waste of time. You're not allowed to do it. They found it's putting your life in danger. They found all kinds of lumdus. But the Rebbe said, by a Rebbe, it wasn't even a question. It wasn't a question. They came to a conclusion. That's what we have to do. By a Rebbe, the Indian of Chinuch, to keep the Eibusher here on this world, should be revealed in the most difficult circumstances. It must be done. The Rebbe said, take it, that thanks to this, we should have the schus and bizeiche that we should be able to keep Teira mitzvahs in the free countries. We should be able to keep it with the same enthusiasm, the same chayis that the Rebbe once said, Soma l'cho nafshi. And it said, came back that the Dover Melech said that my heart, my soul is thirsty for you, thirst for you. Being in a desert, a desolate place. And then he adds, Kain b'kodesh chazisicha. Kain b'kodesh chazisicha. I hope. That's a Baal Shem Tov touched the word. Kain b'kodesh. I hope, and I'll be b'kodesh in the Beis Hamikdash and be in a holy place, not in Golus like this, and hiding in a desert. I should also seek Hashem with the same enthusiasm. So the Rebbe said a number of times that the Eden from Russia, they have to be careful. When they come to the free country, they shouldn't chas v'sholom lose the Mesiras Nefesh, the enthusiasm for doing a mitzvah when it's difficult was done even stronger. Today in America and wherever you are in the free world, it's chas v'sholom can wear off. So that reminded many of the Chassidim and many of Fabrenges, which became Bakedesh Chazisicha. So that's chustek we should have, as became Bakedesh Chazisicha, we should see B'Koriv Mamish now, the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash, Ashlishi, and everybody will be together, and we'll see everybody together. It's almost now, it's mentioned, it's almost 100 years. Tafresh Peizayin, now Tafshin Peihei. It's 98 years, 97 years. And we should have B'Koriv Mamish. We'll see that.
So I just want to say thank you to Rabbi Minkowitz for sharing those beautiful words, and we should be reunited with the coming of Mashiach, and it's amazing, and I feel very humbled that I get to bring light to the world, and now it makes sense why I'm so passionate about the Rebbe and the Rebbeim, because it's in my DNA, it trickles down. And there's a lot more to the story about my great-grandfather, your grandfather, and many other people listening, their family members. Hopefully we'll have a part 2. and we'll bring it to life about how his passing, and we know that he was very, very connected to the Frierdiker Rebbe in his heart and in his soul. And even though they were apart, but they were very, very connected. And it's part of the dream. It's part of the second part with him having a dream. So hopefully we will make it happen as well very soon. Thank you, Rabbi Minkowitz. And if you want to say any parting words like Yud Bais Tamuz, what should people take on in Yud Gimel Tamuz?
First of all, it's, what you're doing is exactly what the Frierdiker Rebbe wanted to, and what the Baal Shem Tov was told by Mashiach himself, that Mashiach will come, that the well springs of Chassidus, of Pnimius HaTeira, the innermost part of Teira, will be spread out. But it says the Lashon Chutza. Chutza means to the outside. The Rebbe emphasized many times that the word Chutza, if there's something further than that Chutza outside, then you didn't do enough, because we only went to the people on your block, on your city. Chutza, the words have to reach all over. And today, Baruch Hashem, before the coming of Mashiach, we see that the Rebbe's work and the Rabbeim's work and the Baal Shem Tov's work is literally spread to each and every single hamlet, every single place where people live. There was a famous Rav in Israel many years back, a few years back, and he said he travels all over the world to raise money, and he visits communities. So he said, but he noticed wherever he went, he found two things. He found Coca-Cola and Chabad. But lately he's finding Chabad without Coca-Cola. So he's finding, because there's mamish all over. They go to places, the little villages, the jungles, who knows what they might find in the Himalayas. They'll find a few Yidden. So they reach out to them. So keep up the wonderful work. And this is a promise from the Mashiach himself. Mashiach told us about Shem Tov, when it'll spread out. And it seems we have to do a little bit more. Like once the Rebbe said, that one little girl, maybe by lighting a Shabbos candle that she never did before, the whole world and the Eibishter and every Klal Yisrael is waiting for that one little mitzvah. It's a little mitzvah. It's a simple mitzvah. It doesn't take too much energy, too much time. We don't know what's left of it. We have to break down the walls of Golus. It's almost completely broken, but we need that last knock to knock it down. So we should have a B'Korev Mamish like now on Yud Bais Tamuz. I couldn't find a better day.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to part 2 because it's too good for us not to share. And sharing is caring. When, like the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, when you know an Aleph, we must teach an Aleph. So you definitely know that Aleph. You know so much more, and blown away. Your students are so lucky to have you in Montreal. The Beis Rivka students, you have an incredible school going on. And I hear this from many people that I meet from all walks of life. Anytime I mention your name, they have the biggest smile. So you're doing the right thing with love and through Torah and light. That's how it works. So love wins everything. So thank you so much, and an honor and a privilege to have you today, and hopefully part 2 coming very soon.
Okay. Aslach Rabban, a good yontif for Yud Bais Tamuz. It's a day to celebrate.
Amen.
Amen.